Here we go.
Okay, we're live now. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Patti Ashley. I'm excited to be here today with you on this Shameless Facebook Friday Live. I got one guest here and another guest I'm going to introduce to you. This is Mowgli, my healer kitty. My series is on grief, grace, and the holidays. And thanks for joining us. Let us know if you're here over in the chat room. But let me introduce my guest today. I'm so excited to have an intuitive, best-selling author, workshop presenter, featured journalist. She's been an intuitive since childhood, and she helps people tap into their powerful intuitive guidance. She helps them access career and relationship issues, and she's authored a ton of books. I See Your Dream Job, I See Your Soulmate, Bridges to Heaven, True Stories of Loved Ones on the Other Side, and Your Divine Lens. And they're all roadmaps for manifesting the work you came here to do, the love you came to experience, and connecting to your departed ones for healing. So welcome, Sue Frederick.
Hey, Patti, you're my friend. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I am just so impressed with what you're doing with your work and your book, and it's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. And I'm so honored to have you. I mean, you've done so much good work in the arena of grief, and I know you have a lot of things that you're going to be able to share with our viewers today. So thanks so much for taking the time to be with us. Tell us more. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit more about you and your work? I know that was a kind of a...
Well, the most important thing to know about me is that grief has been my greatest teacher in this lifetime. It has broken me wide open since I was in my 20s. It has made me reinvent and decide who I am and why I'm here. And I've lost so many loved ones that it has been a lifetime of spiritual awakening through the burning fire of grief. And metaphysically, I'm grateful for that, because without those losses, I wouldn't be who I am, and I wouldn't be helping people, and I wouldn't have a meaningful life. But those losses have taught me everything about spiritual evolution, about who we are, why we're here, and where our loved ones go when they cross over.
Yeah, I love that. I truly agree that grief has been my greatest teacher. And yeah, so
one thing I just want to say to everybody right now, 2020 has been a year when we're all grieving something. And for any of you listening, I just want to say, this is a year for howling. There is not a person alive who's not suffering, who hasn't lost something or someone, a career, a lifestyle, a belief system, a loved one. 2020 has shaken us all upside down and inside out. And Patti and I want to help you guys figure out how we're going to collectively move through a 2020 holiday season that feels terrible to everyone. And how do we navigate that when our hearts are grieving, when we're watching COVID numbers greater than ever? I live in Arizona, and Arizona now has the highest transmission rate in the country. And, you know, so when these stats are just facing us every day, and like Jean and I were talking about, what are we going to do this weekend? Can we drive around and look for Christmas lights? Like, we are grieving Christmas. And we're grieving that our kids aren't here because it's not safe for them to travel from Colorado. And I'm speaking to everyone because I know everybody here has a loss. And we know that Patti has lost her beloved, and that this is a tough time of year when you're grieving a loved one, especially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is so true, Sue. There's so much grief in so many ways. And even, you know, the fear around the virus. And I did a course that's online called Transforming Grief and Fear into Love and Grace, because fear and grief are so intertwined, right?
Completely.
And so I think we're all in this fear nervous system response. And so, yeah.
And what's interesting is that Patty and I were talking right before this began, and we're both having lung issues, shortness of breath, you know, sicknesses that seem like COVID, all that sort of thing. And metaphysically, and Louise Hay said this decades ago, the lungs are about grief. Isn't it fascinating that COVID is about the lungs not being able to get air, and that's COVID is about grief, that we have needed to feel our pain and howl it and release it for so long. And COVID is sort of a metaphysical manifestation of our collective grief. And anybody here is probably going through some sort of health challenge because it's been a heck of a year. And remember, when you are worried about breath, you are feeling a grief, a pain that needs to be released.
Yeah, so true. And I just want to say hello to people that are watching. Please tell us you're here. If you have any questions for Sue, put them in the chat room. So give us some, you said you had some insights that came to you in your sleep, which I love.
Yeah. I really wanted a good night's sleep last night, but you know, the spirits had other plans. So I woke up around 3 a.m. with this whole download of helping people get through the holidays, because I knew that would be the topic with Patty. I hadn't really spent much time on it in the last few days, although I wrote a book sort of about it years ago. I feel like the 2020 grief is different from grief in the past because it's a much more collective experience. So I woke up with this total download in the middle of the night of what we can all do to try to move through this season. And the first thing that came through was quit pretending. And what that means is, in the past, being unauthentic was the way to be. You go to a holiday party with people you don't even like, you're peppy, you pretend. 2020 has called us to an authenticity, a sharing of our pain that has connected us on a very deep human level that we've needed to connect on. We are connecting with our shared humanity now as we share our pain stories, we share our grief. If you do get together with friends over the holidays, please be raw and open and authentic and real, because we are being called to do that. And there's no more hiding your grief and going out to a party and looking all great and pretending that life is wonderful. We need to show up with our hearts wide open and be as authentic and caring as we can, because when we say, hey, I'm really hurting because of such and such, it gives other people permission to share their pain and share their grief. And that's where we do connect. That's where we help each other get through this. The time of pretense is over. 2020 has just kicked it out the door.
Right. I know. I love that. That's the best advice. Yeah, we are. We've, there's so many lies and cover-ups. I've been watching the show, The Morning Show on Apple TV with Jennifer Aniston. Have you seen it?
That's a great show. Yeah.
And I've been thinking a lot about that, about, how we've created this system of lies and cover-ups and corporate greed. Right. Everything has to look good on the outside. And so I think your point is so important, that what if we were all to show up as our authentic self? Right.
Not the world for a loop, Suddenly we're really speaking from our hearts. Suddenly we're not, pretending that we're perfect, pretending that everything is great. And what I've noticed is that in the few times I get to see people, because, life has changed so much now, but when I do occasionally get to see people, it is a much more raw and real conversation. And it is, all of that stupid competition that women do with each other, that seems to have really disappeared or taken a pause, because now I think we're able to hold each other's hearts in a much more profound way. And I think that's part of what we've been called to do in 2020, drop the pretense. And that was the first thing. I had to wake up at 3 a.m. and write that down last night.
You know, is at the beginning of the year, I thought, well, isn't this cute? It's 2020, like 2020 vision. We get to see clearly what is it we want to see. I'm like, whoa, we got to be careful what, you know.
Well, let me explain the numerology of 2020, because, you know, a year ago, I was given this brief little talk at eWomen Network here in Phoenix. I love eWomen Network. It's a national group of women who meet and help each other, promote each other's businesses. And they were asking me to give a little talk on the energy of 2020. And first I want to say, when people go to a talk like that, they only want to hear good news, right? So I was trying to couch what it was about, but I was saying, you know, 2020 is the number 22 based on the number 4. In numerology, that's kick-ass consciousness shifting. It is not taking a vacation. I was trying to tell the audience as sweetly as I could, this is not your year to take a vacation. This is not your year to just have a fun, easy life. It is a year to really grow and work hard and push consciousness. And the 22 is always calling us to do that. And this is such a powerful 22 year, because 0 is, in numerology, is called a potentiator. So 2020 is like the most powerful 22 you could ever have. And boy, have we had our butts kicked this year on every level. But the good news is, have we grown and evolved? Because I think that we have. It might not be showing up completely yet, but I think when we're more back together in the future, we're going to see that things have changed and that we have grown.
Absolutely. I feel that too, because, you know, like we were saying, how death is our greatest teacher, and we're all in this collective loss of some sort. And it makes me wonder what's important. You know, what is my life? You know, it pushes us to the bigger questions.
It completely does. But the good news is that 2021 has a totally different energy. So let me give everybody the numerology good news is 2021 is digits down to the number 5, and that is a number of expansion and adventure and change and courage and freedom. Like taking a vacation is what the energy of the 5 is, and 5 is the energy of 2021. So somehow in 2021, we're going to feel a sense of freedom again, a sense of change and adventure and growth. It'll be so much better, maybe not in January, but as the year unfolds, it will. And we'll look back at 2020 and go, oh my God, how did we make it through that? So we can hold on to that little bit of good news.
Yeah. Well, Stacy's here with us. She said she thinks her vision is more clear, and that is interesting to her. So yes, I think we are. You know, I also think that, you know, we're almost at the 9-month marker of when we went into lockdown, and I think of that gestation period like a baby.
Yeah.
What are we going to be giving birth to next year?
Yeah.
You know?
And, you know, we have to give birth to something better, because humanity has been misbehaving. You know, I mean, there's a basic golden rule in the Bible, way back in the Bible, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And, you know, in all things, Jesus said, in all things, do to others as you would want them to do to you. And whether you're Buddhist, Hindu, Christian, just plain spiritual, not religious, there is a sense that we have broken that rule, that we have mistreated each other, that we have not done to others as we would have them do to us, that we've done to others before they can do to us, that has been our paradigm. And so I'm really hoping that as we kind of remember who we are, as we embrace our grief, as we open our hearts, we're going to remember that we are here to be compassionate and kind to each other. Forget our political arguments. I think we've learned the hard way that our ideas will never be the same, that we can't win enough political arguments to be right, that we've got to get out of our heads and into our hearts. And that's the gift of 2020, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. Yes. Yeah. So I want to, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent now because I know you have 2 more points for us, but at some point before we finish today, I want the numerology piece that's in your book, Bridges to Heaven, which I have here. I can get it on this. I want you to share a little bit about that because you were talking about the numerology of 2020, but I don't want to get off because I want to hear your other 2 points. We have number 1, stop pretending.
Yeah. Second one is feel it to heal it. And I didn't invent that, but that's the most important statement about grief you could ever have. We can try to stuff our pain away, stuff our grief away, but it will resurface in the most dysfunctional ways. It'll make us angry. It'll make us misbehave in all kinds of ways. But if we can just take a minute, go into our hearts through meditation or spiritual practice once a day, and just breathe into that pain. I even say cry it out first thing in the morning when you wake up. Put your hand, upturned palm in front of your heart chakra. Just feel that pain. Imagine the pain pouring into your hand, and then release your energy of pain to the universe to be transformed to love. That 10 minutes of acknowledging your grief, of sitting in it, of crying it out, and then of moving it energetically to be transformed into love. That sounds like a simple, silly little exercise, but what it does is it helps you then get through the rest of your day without that gnawing pain of grief just nipping at your heels, because you've dealt with it, you've faced it, you've embraced it, you've released it. Now, when I'm in raw grief, meaning I've just lost someone recently, I have to do that twice a day. I have to do it at sunrise and sunset. Or I have a lousy day because the grief is just on me all day. And people who are healing from a deep loss, when they're in the first days and months of that loss, it is simply about getting through the day. And we can't get through the day unless we take a sacred moment to feel that pain, feel it deeply, cry it out, and release it, and then go about our day. So that was the second point, just to remind everybody that unless you feel it, unless you give it attention, it is going to nip at you and mess with your life in ways that you just don't want. You don't want that. Mm-hmm. So take a moment, everybody. Sit down first thing in the morning, meditate, quiet the mind, feel the pain, cry it out, and release it. You'll have a better day. You'll have a better holiday season. You know, Patti, you know that feeling of raw grief. When we don't embrace it, it becomes like a toxic poison to us. It'll even make us physically sick.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as Carl Jung says, you know, what we resist persists and often grows stronger. And I think we live in a culture, and this is so much my work, is helping people understand just what you said, is, you know, you do have to feel it to heal it. And we don't like to feel pain. We've been taught to get over it, stop crying, move on, exercise, you know, and just making it better, but really making it better. And I love that whole letting the heart chakra, you know, the releasing and feeling the what you're experiencing, and then letting. I love that. I think it's
one thing I want to say is that a lot of people who are grieving separate their physical health from grief. In other words, they'll go to their doctor and say, hey, I'm nauseous all the time. Like when my husband Paul died when I was 29, I couldn't keep food down for months. Food nauseated me. Like it was really scary physically, because I would go into a restaurant to eat with friends, and the smells of food would just nauseate me, and I ended up running outside and throwing up in the grass. And some people said, well, you might have something wrong with your stomach. You need to go to a doctor. Honey. My body was saying, I can't stomach this story of Paul dying. I can't stomach it. And so what I needed was that quiet meditation, going in, feeling it. Because I was 29 and I was like, this is not going to stop me. This is not going to ruin my life. I'm going to be tough. And I look back at that stupid young girl and I go, girl, you just needed to cry your freaking eyes out, to quit running 3 miles a day, to just be in the pain for a bit. And it was the hardest thing in the world for me to do. So I threw up for 3 months until I was finally able to cry my frickin' eyes out and to tell everybody, I am devastated by loss and I don't know if I can get through this. That simple statement kind of shifted it for me and allowed me to reach out to others for help and comfort and to embrace my grief. So whatever it is you each have to do to embrace that grief, do it so that it doesn't make your body sick, because that is part of what happens. We have to express that grief somehow. And if we're not going to do it emotionally, you better believe your body's going to start trying to find a way to do it for you.
Well, and that's what I was saying to somebody earlier. You know, I was thinking for me, December was going to be detox December because of all the food I ate at Thanksgiving. Well, be careful what you wish for, because I am detoxing with whatever I've been feeling the past couple of weeks, not well at all. And I'm like, oh, you know, I do believe that we detox our emotions through our physical body as well. And I also wonder if a lot of what's going on with the pandemic is there's so many toxins in our collective unconscious. Yeah. So my hope of the silver lining, like you said, when we get to 2021 and the years after, that we've released and we've really gotten more clear on what is the healthy way to be in relationship and be with our hearts.
Yeah. And imagine getting to say to somebody, and they simply listen, they don't try to fix you, to be able to say, I am devastated with grief, and have that other person just go, I feel you, baby. I'm wrapping my heart around you. I'm with you. And not saying, you know, go see your doctor, go exercise, eat better, like whatever people want to say to try to heal you, control you, fix you. You know, this is a time to let all that behavior go and simply just be in that grief. It's the only way through it. It's the only way through it.
I think we're really blessed if we have at least one enlightened witness, is what I call them, people who can do just that. Mm-hmm. And it's hard because if people are really with you, they're going to feel your grief and they're not going to like it and they're going to want to fix it for themselves.
Right.
And so it's such a gift that somebody can show up in that space. And I completely agree, because that's how we get through it. We can't go around it. We have to go through it.
So here's a really practical tip that you can use with your friends when you're either trying to express your grief or you're listening to them express their grief. After you pour your heart out to somebody, then you say, you know, tell me what you heard me say. Pretty simple. And they have to reflect it back to you just the way you said it, without changing it, fixing it, improving it. And as they do that to you, then, you know, they say, did I get it right? Did I hear exactly what you wanted me to hear? And you say, yes, you did. And then say, are we complete? Yes. Simply that with somebody about sharing your pain is magnificent, because nobody's the fixer. Nobody's going to change it, but somebody's simply just going to listen to you share it. Mm-hmm. And that's hard for people, man. You know, I'm from a family of engineers. Most of the men I've loved have been engineers, and they just want to fix things, you know?
Yeah, I know. So, and for me, the thing I wanted to do was tell the stories. And so that's what I always say to people is listen to the stories, because what happens is people go, oh, I don't want to talk about him because it might remind her of Lawrence. And so I don't want to bring, like I'm going to forget. And I would feel closer to him, and it helped me move the grief to just, oh, let me tell you about the time that we went to, and, you know, or, you know, he forgot.
That's such an important thing, is to say, tell me the story of your grief, baby. Tell me the story of your last day with your loved one.
Yep.
Tell me, in our culture, we think that's bad. We think that's being nosy or intrusive. But the truth is, every grieving person is desperate to share their story. And the minute you open the door and let them tell it down to the bones, you are helping them heal.
And that's why I wrote my book, Letters to Freedom, which you wrote a beautiful endorsement for. Thank you so much. And you actually, my partner Lawrence actually happened to participate in one of your grief retreats, and
I was blessed to know your beloved lover boyfriend. He came to one of my workshops, and that's the most amazing karmic connection that you and I have.
Yeah.
And so I'm honored to be a part of your story, Patti.
Oh, well, I am so grateful for you, Sue. And that's why I wrote the book, because I had so many stories I wanted to tell, and I didn't want to overload my friends with the stories. So friends of people who've lost people, listen, that's all you got to do. You don't have to fix it.
All you got to do. Yep.
Listen.
Yeah, that's why in my grief shifting workshops, the first night, all we do is go around the circle and everyone shares their story of loss without anyone jumping forward to make them feel better. Like, we just go from one person to the next and they each tell their story of loss. I can tell you there's not a dry eye in the room when that night is over. But by doing that, we've now shared our humanity, we've shared our grief, and then we end the night with a meditation where we request healing energy in our sleep from our departed loved ones. And then we go to sleep and we come back the next day and we begin working through the process of shifting the grief. But without that core piece of going, like one of my closest friends these days is a mom who came to one of my grief workshops. Her beautiful, young, gorgeous daughter had cancer for 8 years and died 2 years ago after incredible medical interventions and losing her leg and all the most painful things. And that mom, she tells that story over and over again, because without telling that story, she can't get past it. And it just opens up the heart of everyone in the room when she shares that story. And that's what our shared grief does. It opens all of our hearts. There's nobody getting through a lifetime without grieving somebody. When you're 20 and you're starting out, you think, no, grief isn't going to affect me. If you're lucky and you haven't had grief then. But by the time you're in your final years, you're going, oh my God, grief is everything. Grief is what the journey is about.
I remember when my mom was like 80 years old and she used to say, well, so-and-so died. Well, there goes another one. And I was like, oh my God, am I getting close to that time in my life? Because so many of my friends are they're not,
right.
A few friends, but they're also, we're having more illnesses, we turn 50, 60 at that age, and oh gosh, it is a real thing. And and I heard one of the grief teachers I had a long time ago said, you have to tell the story at least 100 times.
I believe that.
And so that's why as many enlightened witnesses that can listen, it's such a gift.
Yeah. So all of you people out there, if you have a friend who's lost somebody, just call them up today and say, baby girl, tell me your story, because I don't think I've listened well enough. Tell me the whole story. And just go into the details, listen to it all, ask questions like, how did you feel when that happened? And just be there with them. It'd be the greatest Christmas present you could give to someone who's grieving.
Yeah. Oh, great advice, Sue. Yes. So what's number 3?
Number 3, and this is my favorite because we can all really get behind this. It's called Keep It Sacred. So, how some people say keep it simple, silly, KISS, keep it sacred. And what I mean by that is when we're grieving and we're moving through the holidays, we need to look at it as a time of sacred healing, sacred awareness. So every day you're going to either go for a walk by yourself and just get in touch with your departed loved one or your higher consciousness, or you're going to sit down and do a meditation and then write the guidance that you get. You know, I always teach a meditation where you quiet your mind with mantra, and then you call out to your departed loved one with love, not with grief and sadness. You call out with love, and that pulls them to us, and then say, show me how to move forward. What should I do now? And just start writing. And you'll be blown away by the wisdom that pours through your pen onto that paper. And that's a sacred process. And if you can every day of Christmas holidays do a sacred process like that, you're keeping in the forefront the truth of life, which is that this physical world is an illusion. It's a pretty illusion, but it's an illusion. And at the end of the day, we are all souls on a journey here. And the more we can recognize that and embrace that through sacred process, through being in nature and quietly alone and listening, get back to our sacred selves, that's where we heal. That's where we know what to do next. That's where we understand how to move forward with our life. Keep it sacred.
Yeah, and it reminds me of what, Lawrence wrote about was grace, from fear to grace. And I've been kind of continuing on his legacy of teaching grace. And I probably we ought to clarify the reason he was in your grief workshop was he had lost his wife in 20 years, fairly quickly to a brain tumor, a while before him and I were in relationship. But, he felt like there was an opening of his heart that he felt was even bigger than love. And he called it grace. And so that's what I've been, teaching and writing about is, what is grace? Because I think the word grace and sacred, oftentimes have these religious.
I know, I was just going to say, that's a totally different thing from religion. You can go to a church and have a completely non-sacred experience, but that's why you have to completely go into your powerful inner wisdom, your God consciousness within you that we all have, to have your sacred space, your sacred time, your sacred awareness. Has nothing to do with church.
Yeah, and it's so funny, semantics, we get stuck on language sometimes, and really what we're talking about, or the way I see what we're talking about is nonverbal.
Yeah, right.
So feeling into grace and feeling the sacredness of life doesn't really even have language. So created language for various things, and so people tend to kind of go, oh, well, that's what that means. So can you define how would you define sacred?
To me, it's remembering and experiencing our connection to what lives beyond the physical. So, for example, for many people, they go out in nature, they're on a walk, if they're by themselves, hopefully, they suddenly have a moment where they just breathe in and they kind of remember in some part of themselves that they are bigger than the physical. There is something more going on. There is a higher consciousness. Nature always reminds us of that, right? And in that moment of that feeling, if they can take a breath into it and just listen to their inner guidance, their inner wisdom, that's a sacred moment. They can also do it at home. I love mantra meditation as a way to quiet the monkey mind until you finally get to that sacred place where you're beyond your body, you're beyond the monkey mind, you're just in tune now with the larger consciousness of the divine, not the physical. That's our sacred space.
And I define it as honoring every single thing, every living being, everything is sacred and it needs to be held. Kind of what you were saying earlier about the heart and, to stop pretending and to tell the truth and show up with heart and authenticity, as opposed to, what was it you said? Do as I say, not as I do, but it's, what was the other one? Or no, what was it? No. You said
to do unto others before they do unto you.
Yeah. That's not sacred. The sacredness is is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And every living thing, every part of the earth, all of it, the universe, everything is sacred. And if
Yeah.
we held everything that way, boy, wouldn't our lives be better?
Seeing the consciousness in everything and everyone is a completely different way of functioning.
Mhm.
And when we can say, I know there's a consciousness beyond what my mind understands, and it's in the trees, it's in the animals, it's in the person who I run into in the store, although that doesn't happen anymore, but it's the person who I bump into who gives me a word of guidance or a piece of advice that's meant to be, that higher consciousness is something that when we allow ourselves to see it, we can see and embrace the divine order of this universe in its perfection. Now, people get mad when I say that because they go, this world isn't perfect. I'm not saying this world is perfect. I'm saying there's a perfection in the divine order of our lessons unfolding for us and of us on our own journeys of evolution, that somehow there's always a door opening when we need it. There's always an answer when we need it. And our job is to say yes, to open our heart, and to trust.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Stacy's appreciating the conversation. Stacy, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Stacey.
Yeah, too many people are not connecting on this level. And well, and that's why we're all here, right? Is to have these conversations, and
Yeah.
little bits by little bits, hopefully people, connect to their hearts. Because I know it's been so important to me. And, we talk, what you're talking about to me came in, synchronicity is what came into my mind.
Right.
About how you and I met, and how, our lives are intertwined. And, I really believe, I call it sometimes magic, like a magical mystery ride. It's like,
Absolutely.
and when we're not in our fear, we're not so gripped in our fear and trying to hold on and make sure we don't lose everything. When we're open, then when the synchronicities happen. And
there are times in my life when I'm so in tune with that synchronicity, where I see it everywhere, where I see the divine plan and everything, where I can kind of feel trusting of whatever comes my way. And then there are other times, like 2020, when I get lost in my fear and my loneliness and in all of that. And I believe that the human experience is to experience both of those things, to understand what the ego mind is all about, the fear when we're lost in that pure physical reality. Man, that's a hell state of consciousness. But unless we experience that, we can't choose the other perspective. We can't say, well, I'm looking for a different possibility of how to live and how to believe and how to think and how to function. And then we step into our divine self, our higher God consciousness, or our synchronicity, our awareness. But we've got to experience both of those. That's part of what we sign up for when we come here as humans. And our problem is, I think, that when we get here and we feel ourselves in all that fear and ego and craziness, we really beat ourselves up for that. And I'm saying, especially in 2020, forgive yourself for anything that you've done or said that wasn't your best, that wasn't of your higher consciousness. Forgive yourself, because we have all struggled in fear this year and in lower consciousness. But the great news is we learned we don't want to be there anymore. And 2021, hopefully, will help us get back more in alignment with that love, that higher consciousness, that knowingness that all is unfolding as it should, because that is a way happier state. And when we're in that state, we're able to move forward with our lives in a very productive way. But man, you can't have the light without the dark. They're all part of the journey.
Well, I'm a big fan of Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden, and I'm sure you're familiar with their work.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce Lipton talking about the evolution of the nervous system, or even Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory, how we've expanded into a social engagement network, and the nervous system, however, still operates on the old, we're being chased by the saber-toothed tiger.
Right.
I wonder sometimes if a lot of this is rewiring that and really bringing us more into how do we access the frontal lobe and make better decisions and not get kind of stuck in this old fear that doesn't really even exist anymore. It's a different fear from our ancestors, but we're still operating under that system.
Well, I can tell you that 2020 was just about everybody running from the terrible bear chasing us, you know. So hopefully we've learned that we're more than that, that we're better than that. And I think there's a lot of forgiveness that we need to practice now, but not only for, you know, ourselves and our own mistakes. I mean, I've definitely done terrible things this year. I've gotten into political arguments with people who were once friends who now I've lost as friends. And I've learned from that, you know, our ideas are just not that important. And I don't think I've ever learned that as well as I learned in 2020. Because what I learned in 2020 is you can be so educated, you can understand things on such an intellectual level, and it doesn't connect you heart to heart with anyone. And that at the end of the day, until we're loving each other, until we're feeling compassionate for each other, until we're forgiving each other and getting out of our heads, we are forgetting who we are and why we're here. So 2020 has kicked that out of me. I'll tell you that.
I would agree. So to wrap up, you're saying stop pretending to be authentic, feel it to heal it, and keep it sacred. And those are really important things to remember. And I really appreciate the download you got to share with us.
Yeah, me too. Grateful for that 3 a.m. download. Now I'm going to go take a nap.
And I don't know, we've got a few minutes left. I don't know if you have time to talk a little bit about the numerology in here. It may be too much detail, but maybe a quick summary.
Yeah. So in 1980, when my husband died, I was gifted a reading from a numerologist. And she was really the person who lifted me above the ego story, showed me kind of the soul's view of why I had come here and gone through that grief story in my 20s and what my soul agreement was with Paul, who had died, and on, in a way that spoke to my heart and soul like nothing else had. And I'd been going to mainstream therapy and it just wasn't even touching my pain. But numerology just opened up a world where when I stepped into it, I saw that sacred connection, that divine sacredness of humanity. So I studied it basically since 1980. And in all my books, I teach that so that you can understand your soul mission from the numbers. It's pretty easy to figure out. It's in all my books. And once you understand that, it helps you know what the right choices and the wrong choices are for you moving forward in your life, what you're here to learn and what your gifts are. That is really explained in numerology. And I teach classes on it and I coach clients on it every day where I help them remember their soul's mission. But the thing that people love most is, what is your soul agreement with another person? That is spelled out in numerology. So I learned early on that Paul, my husband who died of cancer, we had a soul agreement of the number 9, and that's a number of surrender and letting go. It was never meant to be a happily ever after white picket fence story. It was the hardest lessons of compassion, forgiveness, and surrender that came with that relationship. And once you can figure out your soul agreement with people, even the people who've broken your heart, it just rises you above the ego story, helps you live in that higher consciousness. And I have loved it for all these years, 40 years, I think. And if people do a session with me, that's where we go. That's what we talk about. And lifting above the ego story to see those soul agreements, to understand why you've come here. That's how I use numerology.
And what I liked was you have different suggestions for people who have different numbers. And so like you told me what Lawrence's was or what you thought his was and what mine is. And when I look in the book at how the two of us would do grief, it's very different. Like what and he was an extrovert and I was an introvert. And so
wasn't he a 5 path, Patti?
Huh?
He was on the five. Yeah. So the thing about Larry, let me tell you guys, five people who are on the five path for a lifetime, they are so charismatic. They are here to be in the people, in the crowds, and everybody loves them, loves them, loves them, and everybody's attracted to them. Now that comes with its own lessons, because if you're going to attract all that stuff to yourself, your lesson is to choose only for highest good. That even includes addictions will come your way. And so your lesson is about choosing for highest good. Now, you know, when those people are grieving, they're not going to go live in an ashram. They're going to do what Larry did. Larry came to my grief workshop at a Buddhist retreat center, and he stole the show. He brought his wife's ashes, and we built a whole ceremony around distributing Larry's wife's ashes out in the sacred ground. Everybody cried. I mean, he needed that charisma energy, no matter, even if he was grieving. And that's how a five path grieves. So that's how numerology can help you understand that.
Mine's very different. It's funny you're calling him Larry, because that was his birth name, actually, on his birth certificate, but he changed it to Lawrence Freedom.
Right.
Sorry. So like that little kid, that little Larry, you know, he struggled with addiction. He opened the Freedom Center in Lakewood.
Yeah.
And a lot of people.
He learned exactly what he came to learn, you know, and he did it in exactly his five path way. And, you know, you loved a five path man. And I just got to tell you, that's what Paul was. Paul was a five path man. And to his dying moment, the friends were kneeled all around Paul, listening to his final words. I mean, you know, that five path charisma is something. And my heart goes out to you, Patti, because I know that the loss of that is like the oxygen is taken out of the room.
Back to breathing, as we were talking about. Yeah, and there were a lot of people who grieved the loss of that man. I mean, he showed up for so many people with full heart, and it was so sudden. So, well, you're going to put in the chat room when we're finished how contact info, how people can find you, and they can set up a session with you, and what other things do you want to share with people?
Well, first of all they have to do is just go to my website, SueFrederick.com, or just Google Sue Frederick. And I'm also called a career intuitive, a grief intuitive. You can Google that, and you'll find my website. And on my website, there's books and videos and blogs, and you can sign up for a session with me. I'm about to post a new class that I'm going to be teaching in January. So yeah, that's Sue Frederick, basically, is how they find me.
That's Fredder?
Yeah, right? There's a little E in the middle there, Frederick.
Yeah, I spelled it wrong. I caught myself. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sue. I mean, this is so much wisdom. Again, stop pretending, feel it till you heal it, keep it sacred. And this numerology stuff, that would be fun for people to be able to sign up and get that.
Yeah.
You did mine real briefly for me the other day in our conversation, and it was fascinating.
Yeah, well, that's, you know, when they say, what is the gift that you can go to your dying moment doing? I can guarantee that if I'm taking my last breath in a hospice, I'm going to be asking that nurse what her date of birth is and figuring out her numerology and counseling her about it, because I just can't help myself. So, yeah, it's a passion, definitely a passion.
Well, I know. Thanks so much for being here. I think it's interesting that we both started off with feeling like we got some lung stuff on, and we both of us have, you know, our life's work is to help people journey through grief. So I'm sure that Sue's tips were helpful today, and her presence is delightful to all of our hearts. I want to thank you all for being here.
Honor to be with you, Patti, an honor. Thank you.
And before we go, I just want to put a shameless plug in for what's happening on my world. So next week is the last of my 6-week series on grief, grace, and the holidays. And I'll be interviewing Hope Edelman, who's a best-selling author, and she's written a book. Her latest book is called The After Grief, which I think relates to a lot of what you and I were talking about, Sue, where, you know, how grief shows up later. Like, she lost her mom when she was a child, and then how it shows up when we get married or we have children, or you know, how grief shows up in other ways other than, you know, an explicit, this loss is happening. and her other book, Motherless Daughter. So join us for that. The last one for a while. I'm going to take a break from Facebook Live until January 15th, when I'm going to interview my good friend Billy Ortiz, who's a dream worker. We're going to talk about dreaming the new year. And then you can always go to my website, pattiashley.com, and click the link for my course on grief and grace.
Perfect.
Transforming grief and fear and grace in the holidays. So
awesome, Patti. You're doing such great work in the world. Honored to know you.
Oh, same, Sue. Thank you so much, and much love and happy holidays. And
Happy holidays.
We'll talk soon.